Hello, everybody. Welcome to the channel once again. We are here today with a very special guest who is joining the channel, someone that I reached out to about a year ago when it came out to learning just about the broader stock market and the semiconductor space. We have Jose with us. Jose has a very awesome and successful channel on YouTube, about 30,000 subscribers, mainly talking about NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, kind of all the big semiconductor companies. I have his channel in the description and in the chat right here. And he has been in NVIDIA since 2018, and it is his largest position, and he's not selling the stock.
Definitely not.
So he is very excited about NVIDIA. I wanted to get him on the channel because, quite frankly, I don't have any NVIDIA, and I keep hearing Jensen Huang say generative AI is bigger than the internet. I have no idea what the hell that means, and so we need to get someone who actually knows what that means. He understood it 5 years ago, which is why he's up a lot of money on NVIDIA, and break it down for us. Now, one quick thing, his internet might lag. We're having a little bit of problem, so if his internet does lag, he's just going to turn off his camera, and we'll just be doing it audio. But until it lags, then we're going to keep doing it with the camera. Jose, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I mean, I'm pretty excited to be here, and hello to everybody watching. I'm super excited to discuss. I joke around in my channel, saying obviously NVIDIA is my favorite semiconductor company, but thanks to my background, I really do enjoy talking about the semiconductor space. So I definitely follow a lot of companies in that market pretty well.
Okay, so let's start the conversation here. Generative AI is a bigger opportunity than the internet. It's really hard for me to believe that the internet, which created Facebook and YouTube and DoorDash and Uber and all these companies that have created tens of trillions of dollars of shareholder value and opportunity and just market return, that this Gen AI thing is bigger than that. As an NVIDIA shareholder, you have to believe in that thesis to keep buying at these levels. Why is NVIDIA correct about that?
So I mean, it's pretty. I think first we have to think about what the internet did, and I wish we can all get into the CEO's mind when he says this. Right. Another thing that I do believe he mentions a lot is this is the iPhone moment to some extent. I believe we might have heard that as well. And for me, internet, if I think about it in the form of consumer sense, what did that do? And I do believe the biggest thing is it gave back time to the consumers or whoever was using the internet. So before, right, if you needed to search for anything, if you needed to learn or kind of read anything, you had to go through your encyclopedia set to kind of understand what was happening. But the internet kind of shortened that time. If you wanted information, if you wanted data, you were able to get it a lot faster. If you needed someone's contact information, back then you had to go into that big yellow phone book, right? Eventually the internet kind of solved that and kind of reduced the time. So I believe that's exactly what we're seeing with generative AI to some extent. I mean, the perfect example is right now we're getting generative AI, and I want to say maybe the content creators can take bigger opportunity from it. Right now we're seeing kind of this generative image generation where you can just create
You can just
text.
type in anything and then boom, it pops up. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I believe this is shortening the time for users to use tools that back then maybe took a few hours to learn. A perfect example is Photoshop, right? Photoshop, I think back then you had to learn, you probably needed to learn 20, 30 hours or so before you can produce something meaningful. Now, in about an hour's time, in about 2 hours' time, using all the tools that Photoshop has kind of implemented with generative AI allows you to kind of create useful content without being a pro, right? And I'm not saying that generative AI is going to eliminate jobs as it is now. I do believe still those Photoshop users that have been working on Photoshop for over hundreds of hours are still going to create way better content than someone who just started. But I do believe it breaks down or shortens the entry point for a lot of tools. Another kind of example is kind of coding. You can kind of go to Chat GPT. There's a lot of co-pilots that Amazon has created. I believe Amazon AWS has their co-pilot for coding. I know Microsoft has their co-pilot for coding, where you can talk to these co-pilots in form of if you're talking to a human to build some form of function, some form of code reaction. So I think right now, generative AI is doing the exact same thing where with the internet, where it's giving back time to the consumers. That's
a really interesting point. We can sit on that for a second. Giving back. So I didn't think of this the whole week. I've been asking my chat the whole week. Can you explain this to me? No one has said this. Only an NVIDIA shareholder would say this, which is that time to consumers is very interesting. Like when I'm on Photoshop, I have my time saved because there's certain things I can click on that crops the photo. With generative AI, your argument is not only can you crop the photo, you can literally create the photo. You can say girl sitting on a donkey, and a girl sitting on a donkey will pop up. She can be eating a chocolate cake, which means you don't have to go through all of the time and effort it takes to find those individual pictures off Google, which is the internet. You can literally just create it out of generative AI, which is not the internet. It is these trained models that, NVIDIA, with their GPUs and all these LLMs have ultimately been able to create. Is that kind of the argument there?
Definitely, and I think that's where we're at right now, and it's pretty. I think that's the most use basis right now that we're seeing, and it doesn't just have to be a fake image created. I mean, with Photoshop, you can already use your current image. So it's, hey, I don't want this person in my photo. Back then, you probably had to spend a few hours to do that. Now, with just a few click of a buttons, you're able to remove that person. You're able to change your shirts. You're able to change your hairstyle. So you're kind of saving that time. And again, it's not just fake images. It can also be used on images that you have in your personal use case.
Can you speak to me a little bit? So that's on the consumer side, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Can you speak to me a little bit, if you can, about the enterprise side? Why are enterprises buying all these H100 chips? Like, what is in their best motivation, I guess, to be a generative AI company throughout the entire Fortune 500 suite?
So I mean, I think most of these companies have a lot of internal data, right? And I think in forms of the enterprise world, I think the perfect example is maybe if we jump into a company you might know very well, Palantir, right? And if we take a closer look at AIP, for the ability for them to go, hey, send out this drone to check out the enemy. Hey, check out which equipments, which one is fueled up, where are my closest locations, what is the best use case of what route I should take. You need one, the data for that, but then you also need the form of computational power to do that. And in forms of inventory, right? We just looked at it in the form of national defense market, but you can think about that in any form of enterprise world, where if you're a business who has huge kind of inventory all over the world, you can be, and I think Palantir for their AIP for business as well, kind of showcase that ability as well, where, hey, there's a hurricane coming. What would be the best route of maybe sending my truck shipments? What would be the least effective? What would be the way where I would get least effective in forms of negative reviews from customers? So
Right.
I believe in the enterprise market, those are the first opportunities, and then. A lot of these companies just have a lot of data that they can use to create even better results. I mean, I think a company I own, and it's the only one that can come to mind right now, is Sorens, ticker CRNC. And they deal more with the automotive side, and they deal with artificial intelligence in the automotive side. And they've been doing this for a few years now. But now with the advancement of large language models, they have that data of how users use the automotive, the how users kind of respond or interact with cars, and now they're able to create some form of large language model from there. We also have Twilio, right? The huge kind of contact center communication place. They have tons of data. You have Shopify, who deals with probably a lot of consumers. They have all that data to maybe create the perfect chatbot. So you, as maybe a store vendor, you can pay maybe $5, $10 a month for a chatbot that knows how to respond appropriately
Right.
to your customer, and you're only spending a few dollars opposed to maybe hiring someone that you have to teach about your products, and so on and so forth. So I do believe in the enterprise market, there's also that big opportunity there.
Okay, so answer me this. Why does that mean NVIDIA wins if every enterprise needs a generative AI strategy? Why doesn't a Palantir win more than an NVIDIA?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Palantir can definitely win there in the software side, but at the end of the day, you need that computational power,
Hmm.
and that's where a bulk of NVIDIA's revenue is coming from, and that's where these GPUs, right? NVIDIA has right now their core product is the H100, and this is the data center GPU that goes into the Microsoft Cloud, the AWS, the Google Cloud, and what's pretty much powering all these AI solutions. And the great things about these GPUs is large language models and any forms of AI workloads usually need to run pretty fast, and the workloads kind of get split up into what they call parallel distribution. And GPUs, in theory, are really strong to do that. So they're the best at doing it right now. Obviously, there's competition, but in forms of the best, NVIDIA continues to show performance results. They've been here the longest, and they do have kind of the biggest partnerships with manufacturers like TSMC, who built out most of these H100s.
It's really exciting, man. It's really, really exciting to see this thesis play out. Let's go back a little bit in 2018, and then I want to talk a lot more about what's going on with NVIDIA currently. When did you invest in them? And I mean, you were 5 years younger than you were, probably stupider than you were now.
100%.
What gave you the audacity to say, I'm going to buy NVIDIA and hold on to it for the past 5 years?
So I think back then what my investment thesis was just their overall data center growth. And NVIDIA has always been a big player in the consumer market with their GPUs, and I've always used not always, but I've been a user of their graphics cards for either my laptops or my desktops. I want to say the first company I actually invested in was AMD. Maybe even in 2017, 2016, and just kind of following AMD and learning about it, I became more familiarized with NVIDIA. And I believe that data center push, where a lot of the computation that's happening right now on premise is going to be pushed out onto cloud. And if it's going to be pushed out onto cloud, you're going to need that computational power. So it kind of still goes back to that artificial intelligence, that computational, which is pretty much right now constraint with computational power to some extent. So luckily for me, I entered due to that thesis of the data center market. And now that data center market has evolved into the AI space thanks to kind of computational needs.
How did you know that every company was going to need more, or like data center revenue was going to go? Did you see just every company was producing so much data that's what would be the catalyst?
I think at the end of the day is clouding in general removes a lot of expenses for companies, right? Because you don't have to continue to invest in new infrastructure and new hardware. And hardware and infrastructure is very, very expensive, not only just to buy, but to be able to maintain. So it did seem like data centers and clouding in this market was going to become a big win, as players didn't want to continue to invest in the next generation of CPUs, in the next generation of GPUs. Instead, they would rather pay maybe a monthly price, a yearly price, and go to companies like Google Cloud, like AWS, like Microsoft, because it's a lot cheaper and they don't have to worry about that headache, and they don't have that real estate problem with the infrastructure. So
Right.
I think that was the big push of data centers, in my overall opinion.
And you think in 2018, the market, which, I mean, let's just look at the stock price, right? Real quick for NVIDIA, because it seems like the market thought NVIDIA was a gaming company and maybe a little crypto mining company. But in 2018, in 2018, the stock was like $20. I mean, what did the market not see? Did the market not see that this was happening? Did you have to be a technologist to get it? I guess. Did you have to really know this, or could like a 3-year-old have understood that this was definitely gonna happen?
I mean, I don't. I want to say for the data center market, yes. Maybe you could have understand it a little bit more if maybe you were seeing it in maybe some of the business worlds, as maybe you could have been you could have been working in the enterprise world and maybe see that a lot of your data or a lot of your workloads was being shifted into cloud, and maybe you were kind of seeing maybe your on-premise servers being shut down. So I do believe it was possible to see the data center. I don't believe it was possible to see the AI explosion. And the AI explosion pretty much came out with Chat GPT. Even though I do believe one of the chief scientists engineers at OpenAI. It all really started in like 2012, and there's like this whole video that NVIDIA continuously showcases of when this big AI moment happened. And it happened, I believe, in 2012 or 2010, about 12 years ago, when there was a huge kind of contest, and we ended up seeing that NVIDIA's GPUs were actually strong for AI workloads. And from there, NVIDIA started to progress a little bit more and more into it. But I don't think I didn't see it, that 2022, at the end of 2022, we were going to see Chat GPT explode and become something that I personally use on a daily basis.
Right. No, I agree. And we definitely didn't see ChatGPT coming. That in 2023 or late 2022 really started to change the world in terms of how it was going to be architected for consumers. Okay, so let's talk about this. You talked about why you invested in 2018, where you saw data center revenue growing, and that's why you ultimately decided that NVIDIA made sense. Let's bring it back to the status quo. So let's start with this question. Why is NVIDIA still a buy today at $540, PE of 43? Bank of America says $700 price target. I guess why are you not selling your NVIDIA stock right now?
Yeah, so let me just say I'm not buying at the moment, but that's because it's already a big position in my overall portfolio. I would say maybe if it wasn't, I don't know where my mind would be. But the reason I'm not selling is if we look at forward PE ratio, I believe next trailing 12 months is below 25. Forward PE ratio, I can't pull it up right now, but it's either with this current price change, it might have jumped up to 26, 27, but it is in the mid 20s. And I do believe the growth opportunity for NVIDIA within the next 12 months is still there. The second thing is everybody's focused in generative AI. But there's a few other growing opportunities, in my opinion, for NVIDIA. First is just everybody's forgetting about accelerated computing. And accelerated computing is pretty much kind of focused back onto that data center, onto moving into the cloud. That's still a growth opportunity right now. Not every server, not every business is still in the data center side. It's not in the clouding side. If they're enterprise or on-premise servers, they still need to be updated. So there's still this accelerated computing push that's happening right now. Then we have generative AI, which we're talking about right now.
Right.
Another growth opportunity is what they call sovereign AI. And sovereign AI is where a large language model that was created in the United States is not a large language models that might bode well in Europe, because maybe some form of privacy problems, or maybe
Right.
it might not work in Japan because of some form of cultural differences. So what you're seeing right now and is we're seeing countries build up huge supercomputers, huge AI supercomputers, as they want to keep their data into themselves and create some form of large language model, some form of AI solution, to be able to contain that information. I mean,
Wait, so
plenty
hold on.
examples.
I've never heard of this before. You're saying that NVIDIA thinks there's demand from countries that want to have sovereign, let's just call it for LLMs, for lack of a better word, of their
Mhm.
own data that can't be accessed, externally. And that is another place they could start selling their chips to.
Yep. I mean, I think Jensen really broke it down before their quarter three earnings. So on November 19th, I believe is the date, there was a fire chat in France. And one of the things that he mentions is one of the biggest growth opportunities for NVIDIA outside of just typical generative AI is countries just want to build their own solution, and they don't want to. And like I mentioned, right, in Europe, you have all these kinds of laws with data that you might not be able to handle with a large language model that maybe comes out of the United States.
Right.
Um, Another thing that's happening within this is right now we have huge cloud server providers like Google, like Amazon, and like what's the other one? Like Microsoft.
Microsoft, right?
But again, it's very hard for all these cloud providers to really kind of follow through with the regulatory the regulatory laws within certain countries. So we're seeing small data centers being built up in countries where, in France, I forget what's the name of them, they're building up a huge kind of cloud server provider where it's solely focused on kind of like the French law. So if you are maybe a soft AI startup, you can kind of just jump into that cloud server provider and you understand that, hey, look, if I'm building here, I know everything is going to pass the regulatory needs within this country. So it's definitely a pretty interesting solution, but it's one that I keep hearing from them in kind of every conference call that I'm listening from NVIDIA. This is something they're always mentioning, and they believe it's a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity for them.
So you think not only just like this, like sovereign protection of data, but I mean, based on what you're saying, is that there's just so many distributed use cases that are just like, we're not going back to the past, is what I'm hearing. And if we're not going back to the past, there's going to be so much demand. And that's why the market is pricing it with these multiples that are not that insane because the growth is there to justify it, because that demand's just not going anywhere.
Mhm. Definitely. And I mean, I'm not going to say I believe NVIDIA stock price is going to go up dramatic. It's going to go up on a straight line. Like I said, I've been in the semiconductor space for a while, and this is a market that's very, it gets very excited for some time. And a lot of companies, this is one of my biggest risks, and I don't know if eventually we were going to talk about it, is eventually there's going to be a time where companies overbuy some of these H100s or some of these NVIDIA GPUs. And we're going to see over inventory correction, which is what we're seeing right now in the semiconductor space, where companies, they bought too much and maybe for a quarter or two, they slowed down on their purchases because they're like, hey, look, we have too many products right now. Let's really kind of pause it down and let's see what's happening. And that, in my opinion, is when the market is usually in the semiconductor, when we see those slowdowns, everybody starts worrying that, hey, look, this is game over and the demand is no more. And I believe when that happens, those are going to be the great buying opportunities for the AI companies, the AI hardware. I don't know when that's going to happen because if we keep listening to all these conference calls, it does seem like the GPU market is still supply constrained in 2024. So who knows? It might not happen in 2024, but it typically in the semiconductor space, we do get some opportunities when inventory correction does happen.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's it's a hell of a reason to say, you know what, maybe I'll take a little bit off the table, but I'm definitely not selling my entire position here. Let's talk about Tesla. How much can you tell me about autonomous vehicles and kind of is NVIDIA playing a role there? And if Tesla's FSD wins, is NVIDIA going to be part of a reason for why that happens?
Yeah, so that was my other growth opportunity. I didn't want to just continue and seem like the ultimate bullish case here for NVIDIA, but autonomous robotics is another growth opportunity, huge opportunity. As right now we're getting to that autonomous vehicle levels, and I mean Tesla. I don't remember in what earnings call they mentioned it was 2 quarters ago or 3 quarters ago. Elon mentioned that are willing to take as many H100s, as many as data center GPUs as NVIDIA can provide. Unfortunately, NVIDIA can't provide them because of the with the supply constraint. And eventually, what's going to happen is we're going to have I don't know when, but we're going to have some form of automated robots, either doing form of delivery. I'm pretty sure if you go to cities like Austin, San Francisco, you already see like these little robots doing kind of meal deliveries, food delivery systems. Eventually, I think that's going to expand even more and more. You're going to need way more computational power because you're going to have a lot more data. You're going to
Right.
have a lot more sensors. So eventually, in automation and robotics, in forms of automotive, and even in the industrial market, right? You're going to have robots that are building things as right now you have robots building the same thing over and over and over again. Eventually, with things like large language models, you can maybe, or just AI in general, with these kind of industrial robotics, that same robot can pretty much build as many things as you want. It doesn't have to be that same product, and you'll be able to maintain that high kind of throughput rate because it's just a quick shift in, hey, I'm building this, now I'm going to build this, and you don't have to kind of change the whole product line in general.
And for those robots to naturally understand the human world, they need to be powered by LLMs. And your argument is if LLMs are a new form of compute, not just a chatbot, but LLMs are a new form of computation, that's where they need to be powered via something like a GPU. And that's where NVIDIA comes in.
Definitely, and maybe not, maybe. And right now, we're just talking about large language models in general, and I do believe we're still in early stage. This is another thing; we're just in early stages of generative AI. Right now, it's pretty much just text based and maybe some voice based.
Right.
Chat GPT says they're multi-model, and we've kind of seen Bard, Google with not Bard. I forget Google's who's what they're.
You mean the fake Gemini video they put out?
Yes, the fake Gemini. Eventually, that fake Gemini video will become real. And when that becomes real, you're going to continue to need those huge amount of computational powers. And NVIDIA, one thing they're continuing to invest, and they push from a 2 year where they used to kind of reinvent their solution every 2 years. Now they're pushing it to every year to make sure they remain the top player, opposed to maybe your AMD or your Intel, who also have some form of AI accelerators out there.
Right. Okay, we got Kareem in the chat that says asking about NVIDIA and biotech, which is one of the
Another one.
topics that was on my list. Look, biotech is very interesting. I used to be an investor in a company called Ginkgo Bioworks. I am currently not an investor anymore. I just think the valuation's a little iffy, and so I'm waiting to get back in. But from Palantir's perspective, they're working a lot in the drug discovery space, and they're working with Novartis. And Novartis CEO basically said Palantir is helping us understand our data at a broader scale so that we can do more enhanced AI-based drug discovery. I know NVIDIA has a ton of drug discovery partnerships. I think they announced a couple this week. What can you tell me about what is the bull case for NVIDIA going into the next 5 years around where the computational power to actually discover new drugs exists, and how much is that a market opportunity for NVIDIA themselves?
So I think maybe the easiest way for me to explain there would probably if I go back into the automotive segment real quick. And if we jump into the automotive segment, one thing that when you're training form of autonomous vehicles, you need a lot of data. And right now, a lot of that data is kind of collected from the real world. With NVIDIA, they have created a lot of solutions. One is like their NVIDIA Drive Simulation, where you're using their hardware, you're using their software, where now you're bringing this vehicle and you're training it in the virtual world. And in this virtual world, you're able to run maybe thousands and thousands of different scenarios in a rainy day, on a if someone crosses the street, if a car kind of passes you, and you're able to test and grab all this synthetic data to be able to see to really train your model on way more data than you could have collected in the real world. So I do believe that's where we're also going to see it in the in the bio world as well. Where again, this is not a space I'm too familiar with, but one thing that I do here is kind of like genes and proteins, where you're kind of testing out and you're creating different simulations of, hey, what happens if this drug goes to, I guess, this type of DNA, and you're running these simulations over and over and over again until you finally get the right one that works. And that's where I guess these new kind of medicine creations come. At the end of the day, NVIDIA, I actually was just listening to them. They had a conference on January 8th, where it was kind of focused mainly on the healthcare market. And they say, hey, look, we're not here trying to become healthcare experts. What we're trying to do is, one, we're trying to create this foundation so you understand what you can do with your data, maybe something similar to Palantir, what you can do with the software. We're providing that baseline for you, so then you, who are the healthcare experts, don't have to worry about computational power, don't have to worry about maybe some of the other infrastructures, about some of the other software. You just need your data. You need to know what to do with it, and then we can handle the rest. So it's not like they're trying to become an expert of everything. They're trying to provide that foundation where if you are an expert, you're willing to grab that foundation and you can expand into multiple areas within it.
That's a really good way of explaining it, because I mean, they're not literally saying, hey, we're going to, because there is a role for Palantir to do drug discovery stuff and for NVIDIA to be powering that. And NVIDIA, that's why I want to ask you a little bit about the software part of NVIDIA as well, but they're not trying to take over everything here. They're trying to be really good at the one thing they are good at, which is computation and accelerated computing. And they're trying to make that the foundation for literally everything, which, as we're seeing in a variety of different use cases, biotech being a big one. If we're gonna really find cures to cancer and mainstream cures to diseases that are bad for our kids, there's going to need to be some type of technological breakthrough. And the biggest way you do that is through having pattern recognition. And that pattern recognition involves massive amounts of data being able to be computed to come up with these ideas, to have these hypotheses, to even test if certain drugs work or not. So that goes into the software play. I wanted to ask about CUDA as well. What is the CUDA software, and do you think it is a moat for NVIDIA, or is that a part of the business that's not really the main thing investors should focus on if they're looking for long-term returns?
So I think CUDA pretty much started in around 2012. So NVIDIA has been investing in the software market for over a decade right now. And that has been such a huge push for NVIDIA. And it's something that unfortunately we're seeing its competitors really trying to do. I think its two biggest competitors are AMD and Intel. And
What
unfortunately,
is CUDA itself? Why do they make this?
so CUDA is the best. So you have your acceleration, and you have kind of like your tensor cores that are inside the GPUs. CUDA is, in theory, the better way to kind of accelerate, to kind of optimize those accelerations within that hardware. Um,
So
so
it's
uh,
software for the chips, is what you're saying.
Yes. So NVIDIA's perfect example is we created the hardware, but to kind of go into a market opportunity, we have created a software that kind of gives us one optimization for it, but also gives us a brand new market opportunity within there. So that's why they've kind of created this kind of huge software market, and they're doing it all over. And CUDA is one it's accepted by so many. Because obviously NVIDIA has been the forefront, it's accepted by so many different types of AI platforms and AI solutions. Right
Is
now,
CUDA like ARM to an extent?
no, ARM is more just an architecture, uh, uh, I want to say ARM is more like ARM.
ARM
It's
is more the
just a
design of chips. It's the
Yes.
designing of chips, not the actual computational power for those chips to function.
Yeah, so ARM is an architecture pretty much like your x86, and then there's another one that's very much followed, RISC-V. But CUDA is pretty much the ability to kind of use this amazing software acceleration on your NVIDIA GPUs to continue to boost kind of the overall power and computational power there. So right now, NVIDIA is leading here because they are the leaders in this space in forms of market share. Right? They have in the data center market, I believe they have over 90%. Even in your consumer market, I do believe their GPUs are in over 80% of when we look at discrete GPUs. There's a
Right.
difference between discrete and integrated GPUs, but when we look at discrete GPUs, they are definitely the market share leaders. So right now, that has created for them to continue to invest in them, continue to invest in this acceleration platform, which I mean, at the end of the day, if you are a software user, if you're developing a new software, you're not going to focus with someone who has 5% of the market. You're going to focus on the person who has 95% of the market. And I do believe that's going to continue to be the push. Unfortunately, right now, that has created kind of a double-edged sword for NVIDIA because they are so GPU supply constrained, the market is saying, hey, look, we can't buy your products. So we need to find a way to be able to use your competitors' products because unfortunately, we
Ah,
can't get your product to help us. So now the community has really pushed into this open source market. And a lot of these, like for example, Hugging Face, Stability, all these kind of big players in the AI market, they're working with the competitors like AMD to be able to optimize those acceleration GPUs to come into the market a little bit faster. So I don't think it's gonna break the moat for NVIDIA, but I believe it's gonna allow the competitors to accelerate a little bit faster just because now you don't just have the competitors investing themselves, you also have this open source rooting for you because unfortunately they need some form of other source outside of just NVIDIA GPUs.
right. This is fascinating stuff. This is absolutely fascinating stuff. Okay, I got another question for you, and you got to be careful how you answer this one. Okay.
Okay.
Um, because the way you answer this, quite frankly, Jose is going to reflect on if you're a sexist. Uh, would you pick Lisa Su's company or Jensen Huang's company? And give me the reason to pick Jensen Huang's company without sounding like a sexist.
You know what? Least AMD is my second favorite semiconductor company. It's actually my number two position in my overall
Wow,
portfolio.
I love it.
So, like I said, I'm big into semiconductors. I enjoy both of them. I right now AMD is killing it in the CPU space. If I was looking to see my growth in the CPU market and continue to take market share from Intel, I do believe AMD is going to win there, at least for the next few years. Right now, the GPU market is the one that's going to be growing at a faster level than the CPU market. And at the end of the day, NVIDIA is still the dominant
Why?
player in the space.
Why is that? Why is that true?
Uh, First, they have the overall market share position. They're working with companies like TSM. Let me backtrack. The ability to create these AI chips, you need to have special packaging. One of the special packaging is called CoWoS. Only a few certain companies can do this advanced packaging. And one of those big players is TSMC. TSMC is a multi-billion, it's a huge, huge company. And even themselves, they didn't see how big this opportunity was that their capacity was pretty low. I do believe this year they doubled it, but even with this year, they're still at they still can't keep up with demand.
Right.
The one who's paying for most of that capacity right now is NVIDIA. Sure, Lisa Su, sure, AMD have their percentage from TSMC, and sure, they might be looking from other players. But at the end of the day, if this market is supply constrained, I would rather go with the leader. That doesn't mean, and I don't mind if AMD grabs some market share. And this is obviously going to be the perfect time for AMD to buy market share or to grab market share because it is at the end of the day supply constraint. If you are supply constrained, no matter what, you're going to be able to take market share from your competitor, even if your product might be a little bit weaker. I I think, and while AMD might grab market share, NVIDIA, even if they hold 70, 80, 70% of this market, the amount of billions of dollars that they'll win from there will be dramatic. The
What
other thing
about
is,
Or go ahead, finish. Then I'm gonna ask you about valuation. Go ahead.
And then the other thing is NVIDIA. They are, I want to say, years ahead in forms of hardware. AMD just released the MI300X. That
Right.
came out about a year after the H100.
Right.
One of the big perks about the MI300X is it has a lot of memory within it. And that's very important for large language models. The more memory, the more you're able to do inference and the less amount of GPUs that you can kind of buy. So that's a big buying point for AMD's MI300X. NVIDIA, in just 2 quarters from now, they are going to release their H200, which is going to boost their overall memory within the H100. So they're already going to be catched up there to the MI300X in forms of memory. They're already doing better in forms of performance. And within the next 4 quarters, within the next year or so, they're going to release their next generation, the B100. So while AMD is still just released their MI300, which is comparing to the H100, within the next 12 months, we're already going to have the next generation from NVIDIA. And right now, if you look at their free cash flow, I think this past quarter they did over $7 billion in free cash flow. They're going to throw that back into investing into next generation, and that's going to be a bigger push into into even continuing to be better performant hardware compared to its competitors.
Yeah, I mean, the stat that drove me crazy last quarter was NVIDIA did like $6.7 billion in revenue in 2019. Now they're doing that per quarter. It's just absolutely, or sorry, no, they're doing 6.7 billion in profit per quarter. They were doing that in revenue for a full year,
Yeah.
5 years. It's just absolutely mind blowing. So valuation wise, AMD is, I think, 200 billion. NVIDIA is 1 trillion. Obviously growth rates are a big thing here, but in general, why wouldn't I buy a $800 billion less cheaper company in a space that's growing massively?
Oh, I mean, like I said, and AMD is my number two position. I'm not gonna say I would, excuse me, I would be bearish against it. I would buy it, but if you look at just forward PE ratios, which in my opinion, is better than looking at the market cap, because if this market is really growing at the speeds it is, um, I don't think there's ever a cap to a market cap. So Nvidia's
I like
forward
that. I'm gonna steal that. I like that one. I like it.
PE. So Nvidia's forward PE is like in the mid 20s. I think AMD's is still in the 36. If you look at the next trailing 12 months, at the next 12 months, not the next trailing 12 months, at the next 12 months. At the same time, though, these are based on analyst expectations. These analysts could be wrong, and AMD can definitely take a little bit more market share than analysts expect. But even for them to take a little bit more market share, for them to have the same kind of forward PE ratio as Nvidia, that would have to be a lot of growth from here. So for me, I enjoy both AMD and Nvidia, but if I had to pick one, I think Nvidia would be the one right now.
Okay. No, look, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And obviously you can't go wrong with picking both of them. Real quick, breaking news for anyone that's interested. Wall Street Journal just reported that Chris Christie is dropping out of the election. I know that's the most random thing to say during a podcast like this, but Chris Christie is dropping out of the
Jersey.
election. Okay, so here's my question for you now. And I wanna really get your response to this because I've been waiting to ask someone this question. I'm on Twitter, and in my Twitter ecosphere, there's two circles that I'm really heavily into. Well, three. I think Palantir is its own circle. And then you got Fintech, SoFi, PayPal, Robinhood, Square, etc. And then you got Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners and kind of that trend that's going on right now. As someone who's so deeply into the semiconductor space, do you kind of look at these circles and are like, these guys are fucking idiots looking at Fintech and Bitcoin when you've got the most sophisticated level of technology on this side? Why the hell are you guys interested in this stuff when you could be into the semiconductors? How do you think about other investments in comparison? And do you have other investments versus the semiconductors?
I do have other investments outside of the semiconductor. Mostly they usually focus within that range. So if I first I start with like the computational power, which would be like your AI hardware, then I push maybe to like the cloud server providers outside of that. So it kind of within it you can kind of bring it back into the semiconductor. I do have some form of fintech as well. And when I don't think
You can
about
say it. You can say it if the fintech people are stupid for worrying about transaction margins on PayPal, right? I really want to get to the heart of that. Do you think it's so like dumb to worry about SoFi loaning to lenders versus like computational accelerated computing? Like which one's more exciting, right?
I, I mean, at the end of the day, investing is all about finding the best value opportunity besides not worrying about the overall tech, right? So at the end of the day, it's about finding the best business opportunity. And at the end of the day, when I look at these other businesses, I feel like the people investing, hopefully, they know about that market like I know about the semiconductor market. So that's as long as they have that kind of, and I'm not saying I'm the greatest semiconductor player out here, even though maybe check out my YouTube channel, I might be. But I definitely have some form of knowledge and within this
Like,
space.
for example, we got Couch Investor in the chat. He has, I think, 13% of his portfolio in Mercado Libre. Are you looking at Couch Investor and being like, dude, get the hell off the couch? Why are you investing in fucking
and
Mercado Libre?
yeah, and the Amazon. No, no, definitely not. I mean, obviously, there's opportunities everywhere in the market, and that's what creates that's what I believe creates even more opportunity within the market as everybody's spread out everywhere. So while many people are not looking at Nvidia right now, that's fine. Don't look at Nvidia. Don't look at maybe everybody's looking at Nvidia right now, but don't look at the other semiconductor companies that are out there that maybe are at a good valuation right now. So keep your eyes away from the ones that I want to buy at these current levels. Stay wherever you want to stay. That's all I want to say.
Talk to me about Jensen Huang as a CEO. You're betting on him when you make this investment. How much respect do you have for him, and what do you think about him as a leader?
I mean, he wears a leather jacket. What else do I have to just
And he has the tattoo, right?
yeah, I mean, he's been in this a founder of NVIDIA, and he's been in there. I do want to say sometimes he says some. What I've learned from Jensen is the ability to use my imagination to see where this tech goes. Jensen sometimes says some crazy, crazy things. I believe about a year or 2 years ago, he mentioned that that avatars, digital avatars, were going to be in kind of all hotels and fast food restaurants, and all within a few years time frame. I do believe that's eventually going to happen, but sometimes I want to say even the smartest person might still.
Be a little over optimistic. They might promise
Yes.
FSD 17,000 times before it happens.
Yes, but still, I do believe that if someone that big that's into the market has that imagination, it just pushes me to, hey, what else can come out of this space? So I think the biggest thing is the ability to imaginate. And I think that's what most growth investors do, is the ability to imaginate where this tech can go in the future. Outside of that, I mean, if I went back to engineering, I think that I would study a little bit more on AI computation,
You
on
are a mechanical
acceleration,
engineer by trade, right?
electrical engineering.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
so I would say there. I know there's a facility here in New Jersey. I would kind of increase my overall resume a little bit, and I think I would start to look at a job in NVIDIA just because it definitely seems like an exciting place overall.
Do you have a full-time job, or are you doing content full-time?
Just content full time job.
Okay, so is the content subsidizing your lifestyle, or your investments have done so well it's subsidizing your lifestyle?
Content and sponsors from content.
Okay, perfect. Very cool. Yeah, Kelly in the chat, we both are in New Jersey, and we've definitely got him. We've been talking about meeting up for a while, so now we should definitely make it happen this year. That's cool. So you're going full time on content. You're able to make a living on it. That's amazing. That's absolutely
Yeah,
incredible.
it's pretty fun. I think I've been doing it about a few months after COVID. I think I was able to start. So it's been nice. Sometimes I miss the engineering days, but I think that's why I also focus in the semiconductor space. It gets my mind running a little bit here and there.
Right. I love it. That's absolutely incredible. That's great. Palantir, talk to me about, do you have any money in Palantir, and would you sell some NVIDIA to buy Palantir at a cheaper price? Maybe you think Palantir's growth is a little bit better. How do you feel about the company?
So I mean, obviously, I'm not knowledgeable in Palantir like I am in NVIDIA. I do have a position in Palantir. Roughly 3 to 4% of my portfolio is in Palantir.
Oh, wow.
The
That's a decent amount. I didn't know that was that much.
main reason is I came from previous work was at General Dynamics, which was it's a defense contractor, and I know how hard it is to pretty much get new technology to some extent due to regulations and all the kind of clearance and security stuff. And the moment and I wish I would have obviously bought a lot more and more and more. Um, the moment I saw AIP, and them coming bringing that to the government market, I was like, this is insane. I would have never thought that something like AIP would be able to go into the national world so quickly and so publicly to some extent. And that was probably one of my biggest and mainly only reasoning for really being into Palantir. And it really was like a 2% position at the time, which I luckily I got in at a great time, and it kind of jumped into 4%. But it's definitely one I'm keeping an eye out. But right now, I do believe the semiconductor space in more boring spaces outside of just AI accelerators has been giving us some buying opportunities right now.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes it. And see, I think I've done a lot of due diligence on Palantir as a company, which is why I'm more. It makes more sense to me versus NVIDIA, but it makes sense that you're betting on kind of the foundation because Palantir doesn't win unless NVIDIA wins, right? NVIDIA's demand is what pull forwards the enterprise software demand for Palantir to be able to, sell AIP to the market. So I think that's also your thesis, right? Which is that if any of these software companies win, NVIDIA kind of has to win.
Has to win, yeah,
It's
because you need that computational power.
Dude, it's such a black and white fucking thesis, and it's like Robinhood with me right now. I know you probably don't respect the fintech stuff too much, but my thesis on Robin is like if Bitcoin's going, it's black or white. Robinhood's going to go up, right? And I got in at around $10. Now they're at 8. I could have probably gotten more at 9, but it just was obvious. With you're talking about like for the next decade, it's obvious that this is going to go up if this happens. Talk to me about ethical AI. How does NVIDIA think about the ramifications of AI? Do they kind of think it could be a doomsday Terminator scenario if it goes wrong?
I think right now, because AI is mainly text-based of what we're seeing it, what they're really showcasing is more guardrails in forms of text. I forget what is the guardrail they have within their platform. They actually have a name for it, but let's say you create you can go to, if you have a lot of data, you can actually go to NVIDIA and kind of use their products to create your own large language model, your own foundational model. And they create these form of guardrails that as a user, you won't be able to text, hey, can show me how to do this illegal stuff. Show me how I can do this nefarious stuff. So I think right now they're focusing on creating these guardrails. And right now, because we are mainly in the software era of AI, I think that's an easy fix. I think eventually we're going to have to see what kind of guardrails they do when we have kind of Terminators walking around. So, but hopefully they have more than just a quick software switch for that.
Right.
But right now they're doing more like guardrails to prevent nefarious stuff and another thing is when they're working with generative AI, I do believe they just announced one with stock image where they're using legalized training images opposed to maybe some other players that might have just used every Google image out there to really create their own solution. So they're going with, I guess, that ethical route opposed to maybe what some other players might be doing.
Do you think Google or Microsoft or any of these guys experimenting with quantum computing and stuff like that, do you think that's all a threat to NVIDIA, or NVIDIA really has nothing to worry about from some of the large cap tech companies?
Well, quantum computing is actually something NVIDIA is also focused on. Quantum computing right now is something that you can't really do physically. So what's happening right now for quantum computing is you're able to test it out in forms of simulation.
Right.
And you kind of have these qubits processors out there as well. But right now, I mean, NVIDIA, in my opinion, they obviously could do wrong. And they're opening up their investments into where the next AI acceleration might come from. And who knows, it might be some form of quantum computation. These other big techs, though, right now, they are investing in creating a lot of their AI accelerators within themselves outside of something that they're using right now. Even them creating their own AI accelerators is not something that would worry me as an NVIDIA investor.
Right. Okay. Last question I have for you here is in the context of the broader ecosystem around AI startups. So at CES, we saw a company release like a new form of hardware to be able
That
to,
rabbit.
yeah, Rabbit. Dude, I did not like I like the presentation. I did not like how the thing looks, but like we got Sam Altman potentially building a new hardware device with SoftBank funding it. Do you think here's the question, you could take it wherever you want to go. Do you think for every AI startup that is created, NVIDIA just keeps winning because they have to rely on NVIDIA in capacity? Or do you think any of them could actually compete with NVIDIA, even if they're startups?
Mm.
Like to me, it's like every startup that says, hey, I want to use AI, and maybe they're just a ChatGPT wrapper, right? And they just call OpenAI's APIs. That's still more money for NVIDIA, right? So
Yeah,
like
at the
the
end,
rabbits of the world, how do you kind of think of them?
I mean, the more AI tech startups that come out are in my opinion, are big wins for the AI market, but not just the AI market, the cloud providers that are creating this computational power. Because right, all these AI startups, they don't have the funding to build or buy all these H100 servers, so they're going to
Yeah.
go to these cloud server providers like AWS, like Microsoft, and just kind of use that computational power there. And then at the end of the day, they're going to go, hey, look, we're using a lot of computational power. Let me go to NVIDIA and buy some more H100s because our computational, we're getting our computational capacity right now. So it's kind of just that wheel. And I do believe right now we're still in early innings of AI. I mean, eventually, I want an AI where I can go to a quick app and say, hey, look, in the next 5 days, I want to eat chicken, I want to eat lamb, I want to eat blah, 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 blah. I'm feeding a family of 3. Can you just give me a quick recipe, send that to ShopRite, and get that order delivered to me, right? And all that. I don't think it's that far away, in my opinion. So apps like that are going to continue to evolve, and I do believe it's just going to be it's going to be a continued win for the cloud providers, the AI accelerators, and at the end of the day, I also am taking an eye on cybersecurity companies,
I was going to
because
ask about that as well. Yeah.
AI is definitely, I want to say, the cybersecurity market is one that can definitely evolve from here.
A last question, real quick. Couch Investor says, ask Jose about Meta using RISC. I don't know what RISC is, but why do you think he wants me to ask you about that?
So, Meta creates their own AI accelerators. Meta has MTAI, which they're something training AI accelerator chip. Most recently, I do believe that they started to build processors which are RISC-V architecture. I think that's probably more RISC-V architecture. I think that's more on the CPU side. So I would be more worried about maybe your AMD or your Intel, because those are the ones that provide the CPUs for Meta. I don't think it's going to be too much of a pain for the AI accelerator market in forms of GPUs. But right now, we are seeing a lot of companies escape your traditional x86, and your x86 is your Intel processor, your AMD processor, and they're going more into ARM-based processors, which are like your M3, which Apple creates, some of your other chips out there. NVIDIA's Grace CPU is also an ARM-based CPU. And there's another open source, which is RISC-V, and that's something that's getting some traction right now. But I do believe we're still in early innings of that kind of architecture. x86 will still be dominant. ARM will definitely get market share. RISC-V is still in early innings.
Okay. I love it. This was awesome. This was absolutely awesome. 156 people. Thank you for being here. I'm putting Jose's channel in the chat. It is in the description as well. Please make sure to check him out on YouTube. He has an awesome channel. He does content full time. So he's super dedicated to content and getting the best quality content out there. This is probably not the last you've heard from me and Jose. Some more updates on that later. But Jose, thank you so much for breaking down NVIDIA to my audience. I think I do have a lot of people in my audience that are holding the stock since it was like $100, but I would say it's maybe 5% of my overall audience. So I think a lot of people did want to know what NVIDIA is. And I think this breakdown really broke it down.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks to all the viewers and all the great questions. I definitely appreciate it. And sorry if you heard me babbling for about an hour's time, but I really do enjoy talking about the semiconductor space.
Hey, look, I'll listen to someone babbling about something they bought in 2018 at $20 that's now $540. Well, let me ask you this question. Have you sold any NVIDIA? Have you taken some profits or?
Yes, I have, and I've also actually bought throughout the way. So my dollar cost averaging, I wish, would be at 2018. I was still how that was 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I was just kind of just starting my big boy job as an engineer and stuff. So I did a very small dollar cost averaging, and it was very small position. So I wish I had more money, and I wish I had more money then. But that's just the way the world works, right?
Right. The point is, you knew that it was a thing that should have your attention. And in 2018, I was in college, and I wasn't focused on NVIDIA. I was not focused on NVIDIA, dude. I wish to God I was focused on NVIDIA. I love it. Thank you so much, man. We will see you guys next time, and thank you for joining. Have a great day, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.